What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another week of what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheen, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing today, man?
Sitting in first class, baby. Another pod.
We got a lot to talk about today. We got a lot of albums that we got to, and some that we weren't able to get to that we're a little disappointed about, but only so much you can do. A couple TV shows, and then a big Marvel movie that dropped this weekend. So to stay tuned to all of that, hit that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod and help us out by giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify. We're going to jump into a concert though. Dave, you saw the rapper Dave in Boston last night. His album, We're All Alone in This Together, was one of your favorites of last year. Did the album translate live?
Oh, it did. Yeah, Dave is excellent live, honestly. Sounds exactly like his studio recordings, doesn't miss a line, amazing breath control. I was very impressed. Very impressed. Yeah, Dave is in the middle of a North American leg of the tour for this album, which in and of itself is novel because British rappers don't exactly perform in the States all that often, especially as their own headliners. So you got to take those chances when they come. And I mean, this tour has been selling out across the country, so it makes a lot of sense. He sold out 3 nights in a row in New York City right before this, sells out in Boston at the House of Blues. And you could tell that a lot of people felt like I did because there was so much passion in the room. So many true UK hip hop fans, true Dave fans, people that knew all the words to everything. Even Starlight, his newest single from 2 months ago, and knew the whole thing. And Dave, despite having like no set design, really no one on stage with him except for an occasional guitarist, really just him up there with the light show, and which is just like the venue's lights. It's not even like anything fancy, just him. But like he's just so commanding on the mic that it was still just an awesome experience. And just so many songs just hit because again, everyone in the room there just fucking loves the guy. It was awesome. And I think there's a lot of trademarks, I guess, from his shows. Nothing out of the ordinary. You can look at the set list for this tour. It seems like it's about the same. Plays about an hour 20 minutes, hour 15 minutes, roughly about 15, 16 tracks. No encore, notably. But Thiago Silva, which is a very hyped up moment at all his shows, one of his older songs, collaborating Tracy, of course. Famously, he brought a fan on stage at Glastonbury a few years ago, and that fan named Alex absolutely crushed AJ's verses and parts, and it's like viral moment. So since then, he's been bringing a fan on stage at every single show he does to do this very same thing. He'll like pass the mic around to a few people, try and prove themselves basically, and then whoever we select as the crowd and Dave selects, like, brings the person on stage and they do Thiago Silva with him live. And the person that he picked was the first person he handed the mic to, and was very impressive. The crowd loved it when we heard the audition, right? Second person, third person did not give a warm reception to. As soon as he made like picks, like 1, 2, or 3, everyone's like 1, 1, 1. And then as soon as he's like, how about 2? Place goes silent. Everyone was all behind number 1. And then he brings out number 1. They do Thiago Silva. And the dude was spazzing. He was so good. At the end, Dave says that in like the 5 years he's been doing this, he's not sure if anyone else has ever done it where they didn't miss a single word. Which, if that's true, that's like super impressive. That I might have seen like the best rendition of the fan Thiago Silva guest verse. But even like before that, like people are chanting like, "Oh, Thiago Silva," obviously the famous soccer player. Like, and then when we're walking out at the end of the show, people are just chanting it. Like it's like kind of like the rallying cry basically for Dave at his shows.
That's great.
Yeah, and it was just a blast. Honestly, there was like kind of like a lull moment by design towards the middle of the second half of the show, I guess, where he pulls out like the keyboard, talks a little story about how he like would pick up keys as a kid, even though he never became a great piano player or anything like that. And then he actually just kind of like jammed out on the guitar with the backup guitarist, just kind of like doing like a guitar solo. Speaking about how he also is a producer from time to time. Um, and then yeah, he ended it out with Funky Friday, Location, the Burna Boy single, which got a huge response. And the last song was Clash, the Stormzy song, where the place just exploded. It was an awesome time. So, like I said, you got to take advantage of seeing UK rappers when they're around, just because it is pretty rare. Which is why I was so disappointed when AJ Tracy couldn't make the Amine
Yeah,
show from a month or so back due to visa issues. It's because like, when am I ever going to see AJ Tracy again? Like that was such a great opportunity. But got to see Dave, and it was really special to be around a lot of other people that like really knew his music and
that's
had a lot
great.
of passion. There were a lot of flags there, people wearing Thiago Silva jerseys. Like, it was the real deal. So it was a
Oh
great
man,
time.
and this was House of Blues, you said?
Yeah, hell yeah. Best venue in Boston
Wow,
for sure.
damn. Well, I'm glad to hear that Dave enjoyed the Dave concert. As we see these live shows, we'll be bringing it to you. We recommend going to see live shows yourself because live music continue to still be great. Let's move on to non-live music though for today. For today, and we're gonna start off international as
Mm.
we try to do here whenever we can. And we talked about the Rosalia album a month ago. Today we're going to be talking about Bad Bunny and his new album, Un Verano Sin Ti. Dave, Bad Bunny is the biggest artist on Spotify the last 2 years, 17.4 billion streams.
Mhm.
Number 24 right now, currently on Spotify in terms of monthly listeners. But Dave, did Un Verano Sin Ti prove to you why but Big Bad Bunny is this big?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I'm not sure if it like proves anything that we didn't already know about Bad Bunny. I think just generally sonically, this is kind of like a lighter, smoother listen per Bad Bunny's previous catalog. It's less of like the hard hitting like Latin trap that he like really busted out onto the scene with, and kind of more of a smattering of Spanish music's Latin genres, including still some reggaeton, of course. But I mean, yeah, he's already kind of completely established as an absolute global superstar. And we have new data for this, of course, because this album, Un Verano Sin Ti, is number 2 for first day album debuts on global Spotify with 148.8 million, just a little less than 10 million behind Drake's Certified Lover Boy for number 1. Obviously, not a lot of passion for Drake's last record. I think there's going to be a lot more love for Bunny's. And like you said, number 1 artist on global Spotify the past 2 years, including last year when he didn't release any new music, which is super impressive. But he's also been making a lot of inroads in the United States, where that his third release of 2020, El Ultimo Tour del Mundo, that was the first number 1 album in the United States that was completely in Spanish. Like, he's already been making huge strides, and now he has the highest grossing tour of the year currently ongoing, and he's going to extend that into a stadium tour. So there seems like there's really nothing the dude can achieve at this time. He's about to be a Sony superhero in their Marvel verse, for crying out loud. He's doing everything. So I don't know if like Un Verano Sin Ti changes anyone's opinion on that. I feel like it's just kind of more Bunny for people that like him, and there's a lot of people that like him.
I think that that's a really good point. As you just look at his success so far, and then you kind of turn into this album. I don't know if there's anything on here that is going to necessarily like grab new fans or like expand his commercial success. He's doing a lot on this album. It's 23 tracks, a lot of different sounds, but it's really just impressive all the way through. I don't know if every song hit for me, but it was almost like every other track I was perking up and really catching on. And obviously, I think we should caveat that we are not fluent Spanish speakers. I think we
Mm.
both can understand like very minimal Spanish. So we don't know a lot of what's being said on the album, but in terms of how it sounds, what he's going for, at least in terms of the conceptualization of the sound on the album, I think we can talk about it. And It's pretty impressive. I mean, he's jumping all over here, and it's really like kind of moving in and out of different sounds all throughout the 23 tracks. I do wish it was a little bit shorter, just selfishly, but I mean, give the people what they want, Bad Bunny, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, he at least couches this as being like a two-sided album versus just a
Sure.
super long album. So I guess like conceptually, that's a little more palatable, even though it's not like Spotify lets you know when the second side starts or anything. You'd have to look that up yourself. No, nevertheless, like you said, a lot of different sounds on here. A lot of genres I'm not like super privy to, right? You have like Dominican dembo music on here. I don't know a lot about that, obviously, but he did seem to split some of his time recording this between Puerto Rico and the DR. Obviously, Puerto Rico is home. Um, for me, I think the more I guess the dembo stuff sounds pretty good to me too, but also like the more traditional like reggaeton stuff, just because it's like super up tempo and he just is really comfortable on those kind of beats. I really like those songs, of which there's plenty on this. Um, I think the slower stuff, I'm less interested in it, but I think it's all pretty forgivable because he's giving you so much of this at once, and it's not all the same thing that you can kind of just take what you want out of this. And I'm sure that's exactly what's going to happen. Like
Oh yeah.
I mean, right now, like the day after it's come out, it's gonna have, it's like 18 of the 20 top songs in global Spotify is this. That will not obviously last, but several of these songs will last, and they will be the biggest songs of the year, more likely than not. So fans are just gonna take what they want from this.
Yeah, and I think to that point, um, you I don't think he does anything on here necessarily like poorly. Like even those songs you're talking about, I agree. I think the more toned down songs weren't as interesting to me, and that probably is also because going back to what we said, we don't know what's being said, so we're not connecting with the lyrics as much on those toned down songs. So the upbeat things are probably more likely going to catch us. But um, when you think about what really works on this album, in terms of our our personal taste, I think a couple of the early songs like Después de la Playa and Titi Mi Pregunto really stood out to me as tracks that just absolutely caught me. I thought were really interesting, and just it feels like him just kind of like stunting in a way,
Mhm.
and it just feels like okay, I get why this guy is just like a rocket ship that has no end in sight to where his career could go. Um, especially like Moscow Mule is a okay opener. I
Yeah,
didn't
classic
I
reggaeton song, really.
exactly, but then you get into Después de la Player, and it just is like I don't know, it just really feels like he's just like leaning right into these Latin roots, really
Yeah.
going for that like toned up Latin sound, and it just fits so perfectly. It brings a smile to your face. Even just talking about it, I get a smile come into my face. And
Mm.
then two songs later, you get Titi, and man, that track, that beat switch up halfway through is just so cool and so inventive, and you're like, okay, so this guy has so many multitudes to him and to his style. It's really really impressive.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Después de la Playa, that's more of like a mambo song, and then
Yeah.
Titi Me Pregunto, that's one of those dembo tracks, and like right away within the first four tracks, you have basically like three different genres of
Right.
Latin music, and it just shows how capable, not just capable, but like really talented he is. Um, I think later on down the track list, what was it? El Apagón really stood out to me just because it almost has like EDM, like an electronic production, which
Yeah.
to that point sounded very foreign on the rest of the album. But again, cool that he can find a way to squeeze that in and it still kind of sounds like one of his songs. It's not like out of left field or anything. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, like I feel like every few songs though, I'm always like, yes, more reggaeton. This is pretty good. Like
Mm.
Effect Row is another good one for that. Yeah, I mean, I think like the as the title suggests, with Verano Sin Ti, which is translates to a summer with you, it is lighter per his standards. It's definitely not like on the production side. I think it's not as trappy as the first album or the second album, but there's still a lot of range on it, which is really cool. And I'm just very interested in his celebrity just because he's really tackling the English speaking world right now, having already established himself on the global stage. So I'm just really interested to see exactly how high these heights will be that he achieves.
Yeah, and thinking about his his success so far and just who he is as an artist, I mean, it feels like the comparative to in terms of English speaking artists is probably Drake, right? I mean, uh, I don't know if he's exactly at Drake's height, but definitely on that trajectory. And the way he's jumping around within genre, but kind of still holding that rapping hip hop soul in the middle of his songs. I think it sounds like
Right.
the same lane to me.
Yeah, of course. I mean, those comparisons started pretty early on, and Drake famously featured on the debut album from 2018.
Right.
Um,
Mia.
yeah, I think another notable thing with Bunny too is just he's very himself with his fashion, with
Hmm.
his mannerisms, his performance, his color of his hair, whatever it might be. He is not afraid to express himself and also speak on social issues, uh, you know, broadly, but also specifically from his home. So I think he's a very important star in that regard too. He doesn't take the easy way out with things. Um, yeah, so very very exciting. I think like I said, I just want to see like what's next. Like he's going to be in Bullet Train, the Brad Pitt movie from David Leitch coming out this summer. Like I can't wait to see him do his martial arts film
Yeah.
debut. It's going to be sick.
Yeah, no, he's it's hard not to like him. I so definitely check out this album on Verano Sin Ti, and check out our Nostalgia Best of 2022 Spotify playlist. We'll be putting a song from Bad Bunny on there. Let's transition though to rock music, or I guess rock music, alternative rock, with Sharon Von Etten,
Mm.
who is back after a few years off with "We've Been Going About This All Wrong." And we've been talking quite a bit about these female alternative rock artists over the last couple of years. Obviously, I think in terms of rock music, by far the most growing and full of
Mm.
interesting artists that sphere is. But this album, Dave, does this do anything to change your opinion of Sharon Van Etten, or does it feel just like
Uh,
more continued excellence?
yeah, I suppose it's more continued excellence. It's their sixth record, first one in a few years, and I feel like she's kind of pretty established. She
Mm.
predates this female indie rock wave that's now the center of indie rock music for all intents and purposes. So I'm not sure what space she is because like a lot of these new people coming up that are stars in their own right, they cite her as a
Yeah,
inspiration,
influence.
as a reference point. So I I think it's a little different, but I'm also not like the massive Sharon Von Etten fan enough to really compare her records. But I think it is interesting to see this be the follow up to Remind Me Tomorrow after a few years. But yeah, I still liked it.
It's I think the better follow-up question, or the follow-up question to my question, should be, do we care? If this
Mm,
does anything to change your opinion. Because I think when it comes to Sharon Von Etten, what she does, and her ability to not only craft songs that are so textured
mm,
and full and lived in, but also to like really craft these slow burns in a way that's super interesting and have these beautiful little flourishes that totally surprise you, and but just feel so right. um she just is a, like you talked about, this like elder statesman of this genre at this point. And I don't know if we necessarily want her to be, evolving out of this. I mean, not that I don't want her to be pushing herself as an artist. I think there's definitely some moments on this that felt very samey to um, Remind Me Tomorrow, but also at times I was like, man, I really really love what she did with this flourish where these horns come in, or how she built this song up. So I I think I just left being really really pleased with the album, and just impressed with her craft as a singer songwriter at this point. She's a master in my opinion. Um, what stood out to you about the album? What tracks or
Mhm.
themes?
Yeah, I thought track 2 early on really gets you going, Home to Me, just because that instrumental is, like, super big and epic and builds up right in, track 2 right off the bat. That one really stood out to me. I also really enjoyed, the second to last track, Mistakes, just because I thought the performance from Sharon on that one's, like, really great, and, the guitar, very noticeable on that one. And then also, Headspace, kinda similarly, noticeable guitars, noticeable vocals, but also, a little sprinkling of synths, which is, uh, you know, random, I guess, for the rest of the record, but still effective. Those 3 songs really stood out to me. But like you said, overall, like Remind Me Tomorrow as well, this album's just very absorbing because that's how she performs and that's how she makes these songs where there's a lot going on, but it's not like just throwing things at the wall. It's all very specific. And usually the songs really build themselves up. The next thing you know, there's like all these layers to the song, as you said. So yeah, I think it's at the very least very still unique in indie rock in terms of like recent releases. And obviously we're must listen.
Yeah, I so with mistakes, and I agree with that with what you just said. But with mistakes, that song reminds me probably the most of 17. Actually, probably like Home to Me and Mistakes, if you mash them together as a song would be, because 17, her hit off of Remind Me Tomorrow, has that like slow build feel to it. But with Mistakes, it has that like sticky or like memorable chorus that you just kind of want to sing along to or scream along to if you see her in person. Even making mistakes, so it's so good. And then another song that really stood out to me is Headspace, the middle album, middle song on the album, um, which I think it's not only the chorus to that, but just like the churning nature of this felt almost like I don't know, like a train or something like that in terms of how it built up. But with these like little like guitar synth flourishes around it, which I really, really loved. Um, but yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with some of those. Come Back also stood out to me, and Far Away was another standout. I really loved the distorted guitar on that, and the percussion was really really interesting too. She has like I talked about this ability to like build up a song and like texture it, and I was trying to think if there's another artist that does
Mm.
it as well as her. The only one that came to mind for me was Tash Sultana. I don't know if you listened to Tash Sultana at all. Really interesting artist who she like keeps looping things over and over, so she's just constantly like building this like cacophony of sound, which is really,
Mm.
really impressive. But is
Interesting.
there anybody that comes to mind for you that does
Huh.
that?
That's a great question. I'm not too sure. Um, Definitely probably someone who's more in like the singer slash producer side of things, someone who's very
Yeah,
involved in the creative process. So it'd have to be someone like that. But no one immediately comes to mind beyond
yeah,
obviously like just generally like, involved people like Kanye, I guess. But like, it's a good company to be in when you're this kind of artist because it's a specific way of making music, but also a really awesome way of kind of showing who you are and what your musical identity is because you're gonna stand out basically by default. And it was kind
yeah.
of cool that Sharon didn't release any singles for this album
Mhm.
too. I think that's a really cool but confident choice.
Yeah, she seems very much just like okay with who she is and what she's doing, and it always comes out good. So I don't blame her. Just one more note on I can't remember if it's the opener. Darkness Fades. I think it might be the opener. Her delivery and the way she sings on that reminded me so much of Radiohead, and I was wondering if maybe she was listening to something like OK Computer with some of this.
Mm.
At times it sounds like mechanical a little bit, and I was it just felt very much like there might have been some influence to that. The themes of it are not close to OK Computer, in my opinion. I mean, she's kind of just exploring human existence at this point in life, and it. I don't know if there's anything like super groundbreaking in terms of her observations, but just the way that she crafts this is really, really great. So definitely, I just wanted to mention this too. If you liked any of the new Taylor Swift albums, Evermore or Folklore, you really should go and listen to this stuff because this is where Taylor probably got a lot of her like influence on that and like thoughts that I mean Desner probably too also was digging Sharon Von Etten while they were making that. So this is really I think the precipice for a lot of
The
those things. So,
source.
right. Let's move on though to a bigger alt rock. Are they just rock now? Arcade Fire. I mean,
Sometimes it's a bit folky, to be
yeah,
honest.
true.
Definitely a rock band for sure.
Definitely a rock band. Arcade Fire, back for the first time in 5 years since
Mm.
Everything Now dropped in 2017 with their new album We. And Dave, do we care about Arcade Fire in 2022?
Oh wow! Right off the bat,
Do you care
it,
about Arcade Fire?
do I care about? That's interesting because there's a lot of love for this album, broadly speaking. There's advanced reviews out. The band's confident in what they've created. Clearly, also they just capped off a somewhat surprise Coachella performance that got a lot of attention as well. And it seems like people, or at least certain people, are very eager for Arcade Fire to like be back in the mix. Of course, previous winners of the Grammy for Album of the Year, and at one point or another, perhaps the biggest,
Oh
American
yeah,
rock band, I would say.
North American.
Yeah, North American rock band, and people, I guess people want that back. Do I personally want that back? I guess not. I don't have a lot of reverence for the classic Arcade Fire jams. However, this is definitely a lot better than Everything Now, which I listened to once, didn't like, and never revisited. Uh, we,
Yeah,
we is definitely an interesting album, and that definitely counts for something when a band's been around as long as Arcade Fire has.
you think about Arcade Fire in 2022, and I just want to say I care about Arcade Fire in 2022. I don't know if I hold them up on the same pedestal I did before Everything Now in this album. I do think this album is a good course correction for them, and definitely I'm impressed with parts of it. But the suburbs is just such a seminal record. It's just one of those records you look back and you're like, any band that makes this is a band that you should care about because if they can ever recapture that, you're gonna get a classic. And they haven't been able to quite recapture that. I think Reflector had moments, but what didn't get quite up to that. Everything Now, like you mentioned, this like foray into like disco influence sound that was trying to talk about the present moment of political, social, and
Right.
societal discourse just
Most
didn't really
overtly pop
work.
music,
Right.
definitely not what they used to make. I guess we is closer to their
Yes.
most heralded music at the very least.
But you mentioned those surprise shows, and they've had those surprise shows not only at Coachella, but I think they did a pop up one in New Orleans and one in New York City as well. So they've been doing this a little bit, and it just feels like they're kind of getting back to their roots on this. Definitely exploring and more relatable themes, I'd say, but also I think leaning back into the songwriting style that really worked for them. This like very conceptual idea. They break this up into chunks. It's Age of
Mm.
Anxiety 1 and 2, End of the Empire 1 through 3, and then 4. Like they're really trying to like go for something in terms of how they do this. And I don't know if it all really fits, but I think what they were trying to do is build these really grand, big sounding songs that build up, similar to what we just talked about Sharon Von Etten, that slow burn build up sound. And when it hits, it hits. I think things like their single "Lookout Kid" is just a really, really beautiful, wonderful song that's
Mm.
super reflective of Win Butler, and I really loved that one. I think there's a couple other tracks on here I really liked, and overall, I think this is a good step forward for Arcade Fire as one of these like godfathers of rock at this point, which is kind of strange to say, but I mean, with where Foo Fighters are at, the Killers are obviously the one who's touring and still huge and continuously doing stuff, but it feels like Arcade Fire is really in that, like, they're one of the tenants of rock at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, which is it's kind of interesting too. If you go on Wikipedia and look at like the list of band members and past
Mm,
members, it's a long list of people that are no longer involved, including
it's a big band.
Will Butler, who is now leaving after being involved on this sixth album, We. And yeah, I think it's definitely a reestablishment that they're going to be around for a very long time, still at the very least. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of at least cool moments on all these songs, even if like they some of these songs can be a bit meandering, but they're trying to achieve something with the concept, with the storytelling. So I mean, it all makes sense to me. I thought Unconditional One, Lookout Kid, as you said, kind of has like a call and response feel with the lyrics, which I really enjoy, and I guess makes it a good fit for a single. But right off the bat, honestly, with the album Age of Anxiety 1, once there's that like switch up halfway through and you get this like electronic bass line showing up all of a sudden, I was like, wow, that's this very specific choice and kind of sets you up for the surprise that you can find on the production and instrumentation side of things throughout the rest of the album.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think Age of Anxiety 1 really stood out for the exact reason that you talked about. You get that uh bass kind of dropping in there, and then the synths come in, and then the background chorus starts singing in that really high pitched tone. It's like, oh, okay, so this is Arcade Fire here. This is where we're going with this. Yeah, I think that Age of Anxiety 1 and 2 I actually thought were both pretty good. Um, End of the Empire I thought was interesting. It's I think that that's a really like big swing because they're really reflecting on just like the state of, I'm gonna assume, American politics without them naming American politics and America just in general. And I couldn't quite place exactly what it reminded me of. Maybe a Connor Oberst type sound,
Oh wow, yeah,
like in terms of like how they were singing on that. But oh
eyes are
man,
bright.
yeah, Bright exactly. Bright Eyes sounding track. But I thought it was interesting and sounded nice, but it's more toned down than a lot of the other ones we've talked about. Any other moments that you liked on this or anything else?
I mean, don't they say specifically the end of the Great American Empire or
Oh, do
something?
they?
Or
Oh.
am I just conflating this with like the Taylor Swift song "Last Great American Dynasty" or whatever it is off of?
No, you might
Trying
be
to
right, I
remember.
think.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed "End of Empire 4" just for my favorite lyric on the whole album. We unsubscribe. Fuck season 5. Awesome line.
Although I do have to say, if you unsubscribe from a lot of shows that far on, like Better Call Saul, you're missing out. So definitely be
Right.
watching some
Yeah.
shows, and
Yeah.
we'll tell you about those. So hit that subscribe button on Nostalgia Pod. But yeah, I mean, in general, a course correction, Arcade Fire finding themselves again, and you just love to see it. So hit that hit that follow on our Nostalgia Best 2022 playlist to stay tuned to the Arcade Fire jam that will be dropped on there, as well as the LMI jam that's going to be dropped on there. LMI back, Dave, and it's been a while. What was it worth the wait for you?
I think so. I had a lot of anticipation and hype for this second LMI album, partially because, as you said, it's been a long time. The LMI self titled debut was fall 2018. And if we're really backing it up, her third EP Ready, that was February 2017. That's when Boot Up officially came out for the first time.
That's crazy.
Of course, her absolute monster romantic R&B smash, 7 times platinum in the United States, wins uh, best R&B song at the Grammys, nominated for Song of the Year. And then also off that album, he had Trip, which was 5 times platinum. Like she had made a huge, huge impression, and kind of coming at a time where female UK R&B singers were having a bit of a moment alongside her peer, Georgia Smith, for example. But I think it's interesting to revisit LMI now and think about where she exists, because I think she's coming out in a slightly different landscape for R&B music, just because LMI is a very romantic and positive person in her music, in her R&B music, and that's definitely different from a lot of the other stuff we get, which can be overtly toxic or at the very least sad. You know, the LMI makes more or less happy music, and in general, I just think she has a lot of smashes from her early EPs and the debut album. So I just wanted to hear new songs of the same caliber on this second album, which I had been anticipating. So I think there are some new songs to add to the LMI canon, and that's very exciting because when you take your time, intentionally take your time to make the follow up, you really hope it hits.
I was blown away by this album. I thought it just sounded so smooth, so beautiful, and she really just has this knack for crafting songs that don't necessarily like blow you away with like a powerful voice or even like a anything like super impressive sonically, but it just feels so buttery and so fun and pleasurable to be in these songs. And man, I'm so glad to have LMI back making music. After the,
Mm.
like you said, a 3.5 year layoff, because she's excellent at it, and she just is. Her voice is just so smooth. I really love it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and she knows it too right off the bat. Track one, trying.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Very, very specific vocal layering there,
Hmm.
and I mean, just sounds great. And
Yeah.
then track two, not another love song. She sounds good too, but now she's throwing like this big bass at you on the
Hmm.
production side of things. Yeah, I think it's very enjoyable, very smooth, as you say. But I think, like I said, lyrically, it really is worth considering how different lyrically she is from most of like the popular R&B music there is right now.
Yeah. I agree, and trying was a clear standout right from the beginning. But a few tracks later, didn't say with Blotto, I really liked.
Yes.
Um, uh, just beautiful, and Lotto fits so well. The way that they transition with Ella's like vocals fading out and Laudo just coming in, but it
Yeah.
then sounds so perfect. And they kind of like go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
Really, really nice.
Lotto's having quite the moment right now. Good for her. She's really rising because she's a good rapper. So yeah, I thought that was a very choice feature. Honestly, on how with Roddy Rich.
Mm.
Roddy coming off a very bad, disappointing album, but even Roddy fits in.
Yeah.
Not too bad next to LMI, you know. Um, but track five, Fallen Angel. That's another one that like immediately catches your ear. Apparently, at the listening event, a lot of the
Mm.
critics were like, "Hey, can we run that one back? We got to hear that again." And I think that's really because great performance from LMI as expected. But then halfway through, huge switch up in the song, and you get this choir, not even like background choir, not even background vocals, just straight up choir for the
Yeah.
rest of the song. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, definitely an awesome moment there. Um, what other tracks did you like? I mean, I feel like I
Yeah.
was writing down a lot of them as I went through, and it feels like there's a lot of like 2000s R&B influence kind
Mm,
of put in, and even times of like it feels very like Kanye inspired to me at points too. Like that choir you mentioned feels like something off of Pablo, for example, to me, like
sure.
right off the first track. But what else stood out to you?
I thought the second to last song, Sink or Swim, uh,
Mm.
was nice for me. But that's the thing too about LMI. Like she has album cuts on all of her work. Like I really love Breakfast in Bed off the 30p, for example. But there's gonna be a lot of songs on this that aren't singles that people are gonna really dig. And even though it's a long album, there's a lot of songs on here, 15 songs. I think it's totally fine because it's been such a long time. And like there's nothing that's low effort on this at all. It's all really good. And she just has a natural presence with her voice that just feels like a very specific presence within R&B overall. So I have
Yeah.
nothing but good things to say, really.
Yeah, same here. I mean, it's hard to just kind of keep saying like, "Oh, I loved this track" or "I loved this." Pieces stood out to me. I really liked that. I thought the chorus was nice. And just one of her like catchier ones on here. "Power of a Woman" I thought was great, and that's followed up by "A Mess," where her and Lucky Days have, I think, wonderful chemistry together and sing so beautifully on that. And then, later on, "Leave You Alone," um, which is right before "Sink or Swim," the one that you mentioned, has that like really auto-tuned vocal thing at the end that reminded me a lot of like um College Dropout Kanye, where he had a lot of that like on the workout plan, the "let me see you work out for me," like
Gosh.
that part just like reminded me of that, and feels like she might be trying to harken back to some of that time. But yeah, I mean, you go through this and you're just gonna have probably like 6 or 7 songs you just end up wanting to run back immediately. So check out "Heart on My Sleeve" from LMI. She's wonderful. She's great. Let's finish it up though with another sophomore album
Mhm.
from Jack Harlow, who, we talked about Bad Bunny earlier being the 24th most listened to artist on Spotify. Jack Harlow is the 16th, man.
Right.
He's huge. He's
In
a
the US.
superstar in the US. Yes, in the US. And I know that you have some mixed feelings, I think, about Jack Harlow in terms of, is he does he deserve all of the acclaim he gets? And I wonder if "Come Home, the Kids Miss You" did anything to change your opinion on that.
Right. Well, I think more specifically, it's not that Jack Harlow has a lot of acclaim. He just has a lot of success and
Mm,
popularity to this point. Obviously, I really love What's Poppin', seminal song of early 2020, 2020 TikTok, pandemic TikTok, etc. It's a really good song. And Jack Harlow generally is a competent rapper. He's very technical. My thing though, and what I said a lot about, That's What They All Say, which came out at the end of 2020, is I just don't think the music has been there for Jack Harlow. Like, he doesn't actually have as much personality in his music as people seem to ascribe to him because they like his celebrity. And meanwhile, he's just rapidly ascending. He is effectively a top tier rapper in the United States. And I just don't think it's justified in his music. There are other obvious reasons why he's gotten as big as he has. And it's nothing against the guy. I actually think he's a really nice guy. Seems like very well intentioned. He seems to be an open ally, obviously, following his collaboration with Lil Nas X on Ministry Baby. And, he stopped drinking a year and a half ago. He moved back to his hometown of Louisville. Seems very intentional about keeping a straight arrow. And he's also very respectful of the space he's in, obviously, as a white guy in hip hop. But I just haven't heard the records, at least not consistently, to this point, to feel like he's worthy of this very high status he has. Because I think it's very interesting to see the music he does have that's successful, the hits he does have to this point. He's basically making club hip hop. He's making more mainstream rap music. He's not really going for the lyrical miracle crowd, and he's not doing any like cringy, things we might associate with like stereotypical white rappers or anything. He's making mainstream hip hop music and he's getting some run like in clubs. And it is very kind of fascinating for me to see Jack Harlow finding success making club records because no white rapper has really done that. You know, I think G-Eazy had no limit, of course, but other than that, the white rappers that are successful, Eminem was on the radio and Mac Miller was on the internet. Like we haven't had someone as centrist and mainstream that was white like we have right now with Jack Harlow. So this second album, Come Home, the Kids Miss You, I definitely think it's a better record and a step in the right direction. But I'm still a a bit lukewarm overall on the quality of his music.
Sounds like "Come Home, the Kids Miss You" didn't change anything in your opinion on that, right?
Well, the thing is, I would say Jack, he's still pretty intentional with his music. I think you have to look no further than First Class, which became the number one song in the country. You know, when he released that snippet, of course, famously now, sampling Fergie's Glamorous in a very fun way, he releases the preview on like his Instagram, and it gets a really big response. Credit to him and his team for immediately putting the song out at the end of that very week.
Oh yeah.
Blows up on TikTok. Again, in the sense you could be cynical and say it's kind of like a ready-made for TikTok chorus. Either way, it's a really cool sample. I like it. That at least explains to me that Jack is still pretty thoughtful about his
Oh yeah.
music, at least in some fashion. And the Drake comparisons that he gets from the way he actually raps, uh, they certainly aren't stopping when you have as an intentional of a release thought for a song the way Jack did with First Class. And I think there's a few more moments on the record, but there's also times where I think like when he's like trying to do his storytelling stuff again in his bag, again, technical rapper, I just don't feel like he brings much to the table at all. Like, yeah, like he might have a witty line or two, but the problem is like I just don't hear the personality. You know, he has all these viral moments as a celebrity. You know, like is he flirting with Sweetie? You know, trying to holla at Doja Cat in the Instagram live in general. Seems to have a very high approval rating with women across all races. But that personality isn't actually in the music if you really listen to it.
Yeah, I mean, his personality is just like being a Mac Daddy, right? Like he just is the kind of guy who's hitting on girls and trying to, hook up with them. And I think that's relatable to a lot of younger people who are listening to this music. He has a song called Dua Lipa, which is pretty much just him, macking on Dua Lipa, which is whatever. It is what it is. I mean, I agree with you. I don't know if this album I'm gonna leave and be like, man, this is like a Dave album where just the way he story tells and goes into thoughtful content. No, I mean this is vibes, bro, and the vibes on this are immaculate, and I just really enjoyed listening to this because it was a lighthearted listen for me where I was like, oh, I don't have to I can just turn my brain off and just kind of let Pharrell drop in here for a little bit, or let uh Snoop Dogg just drop in for like a quick like 20-second cameo and then pop back out and listen to like a fun beat, which I think the beats on this are really really fun to listen to. So I don't know. Jack Harlow is a superstar for being a superstar, not for being a rapper, and I'm kind of cool with that.
Yeah, again, to his credit, like he really rides for the Ville,
Yeah.
and obviously Bryson Tiller precedes him in that regard. However, Jack has really done a lot to shine a light on ESTG, who's rapidly rising out of Louisville as well. And like I said, his kind of open allyship as a friend of Lil Nas X is great to see as well. And like you said, I think my fear is that he kind of goes a little dicky route, right? Uses rap to become a big star and then kind of leaves it behind to do other stuff. Jack Harlow cast in the White Man Can't Jump remake. Jack Harlow, though, has a big body of work as a rapper, and he says he's still hip hop first. So, not going to begrudge him for taking other opportunities as they present themselves, of course. Um, I just want to continue to hear the growth uh, in the music because, like, for me, a song like Nail Tech, which I believe was the first single for this album, a song that got on Kanye's radar actually, that led Kanye to pronounce Jack as top 5 right now and have Jack come up on Donda 2. Nail Tech for me though, it's like, yeah, it's just kind of like a solid song. Cause again, I just don't this is not enough Jack for me in his music that it just doesn't rise above anything else I listen to. And I just feel like there needs to be a higher bar for people that kind of skip a few steps in their fame the way Jack has, because again, the records haven't really been there consistently enough to have Jack Harlow be more popular artist in the United States than Bad Bunny, to be blunt. However, like you said, Dua Lipa, whether it's a gear for TikTok or not, a relatable hook. Who else would disagree with Dua Lipa? I'm trying to do more than do a feature. It's a great line.
It's a great line, and that's the thing, right? Is he really feels like an artist who just gears he does what Drake isn't really able to do as well, which is he gears his music for the 20-second, 30-second snippet that is TikTok, right? Like
Right.
you talk about now tech, and there's that line in the middle. I forgot what it is, like da 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 da, but I'm fly though. Da, da,
Right.
da. And it's just like you can just see so many people making a TikTok with that as like the song in the background, like either dancing to it or like cutting things together, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, like this makes total sense. Like why someone who does it, like someone who comes up with this, like is successful because it's so catchy for a small
Right.
amount of time, and then you can kind of get out and people aren't going to be like, it's the Willow Smith effect too, same thing, where it's like
Mm.
you listen to those Willow Smith songs, pretty forgettable the first time, but when you
Got a
take 30
vibe.
seconds, yeah, exactly, you take a 30-second clip and you're like, is this the greatest song ever made? Because it might be. This might be the most
Right.
catchy song I've ever heard.
Right. And there's definitely something to that, of course. Drake might not be as successful on TikTok per se. I mean, big on TikTok, obviously, he's Drake, but like Drake's pen though is
Yeah.
significantly more
Oh
advanced than
yeah.
Jack's.
Yes.
That's why Drake runs Instagram captions,
Right.
slightly
Exactly.
different, but also a more impressive skill. To be
Hmm.
honest, I think we also need to, I think at this point, analyze that finding success on TikTok at times can be low hanging fruit. And if
Oh
you're having
sure.
that dictate the creative direction of your songs or your record as a whole, I don't know how commendable that actually is. So, like I said, it's definitely an improvement and all that. But I still want to hear a bit more. I think for me, some of the slower tracks on this would probably be more popular with women. I think that's for me where Jack really loses me because that's where I'm like, ah man, like you're pretty good. You're pretty good at at flow and stuff.
Yeah.
I think on was it one with smile in the title? What's it?
I do anything to make you smile.
I
The
do anything
third
to make
track.
you smile. I think his flow on that's awesome. The Golden
Yeah.
Corral line, the Rick Pitino line, like when he's doing that, like more fun, up tempo rap, I guess kind of in vain, like what's popping. That's where I'm really with it. I think there's really fun tracks. But like when he tries to slow it down and get on the other side of the Drake comparisons, I just don't think he has that in him right now, despite how many people romanticize him.
Yeah. I'd do anything to make you smile. It has that Ed Sheeran line, which I really like. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like in the second half, and it really
Mhm.
made me laugh.
Yeah,
I love that the track before I mentioned Young Harleasy, that Snoop Dogg drop, and just the
the drop
overall
in's
vibes
nice.
on that song is just like really fun. Um, I don't think all the features on this work so great. Justin Timberlake totally forgettable. I feel like
Yeah,
on this, which unfortunately for Justin Timberlake feels like a lot of his career recently.
I kind of wanted more from that too. Justin Timberlake, of course, from Memphis, not too far from
Yeah.
Jack and the Ville. Would like to hear them do something else, because in a sense, there's a lot of parallels to Justin Timberlake's rise to fame that we have
Mhm.
now with Jack. But yeah, I mean, in a sense, I was like, oh, nice to hear Justin Timberlake, and come to think of it, probably due for another album from him. He hasn't made a pandemic album yet.
Man in the Woods.
Yeah,
You
we'll see
want
if
more
he's
of
still in
that?
the woods. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. If he's still in the
Uh,
woods, don't drop it, please.
please not. Honestly, though, Churchill Downs, not what I expected. Obviously, that's the much valued feature, Drake feature on the album. A song that leaked, much to both their disappointment. And it's not what I expect because I thought it would just kind of be like a radio play, a fun rap song. It's not really that. It's
Yeah,
more about a rapping ass rap song. This is like Drake on like Weston Road Flows or
exactly.
something,
Yeah.
and or 6 a.m. on Bridal Path off Loverboy or something, And I think that's where Jack is also showing. It's like, hey, I do rap, and Drake actually wanted to rap for me, and that also counts for something.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good. I just going back to the features, the Pharrell track, the production on it feels like a Pharrell track, but I didn't know if there's anything that really popped on that for me.
Yeah.
But the track after the Pharrell track, Little Secret, I think that's one of those toned down ones that you talked about didn't really hit as much for you, but I could see that being a song that we hear everywhere, especially for that verse where he's like, I know that you hate whatever he finishes with,
Mhm.
where it's like being famous or being high or what, he kind of switches it up from verse to verse. But I think that one's probably going to be one that will blow up everywhere. Um, yeah, I mean, what else stood out to you about this album? Any other thoughts on it?
I think the one line I enjoy, I actually forget what song it's on. I'm on August Cloud 9 or something like that. Shout out August Cloud, shout out Euphoria. And the First Class video
Yeah,
stars Anita, the Latin star. Thought that was a nice choice there. Yeah, like I said, it's an improvement. And I like Jack. He seems like a really good guy. He's a fun celebrity, no doubt. Um,
yeah,
and I hope that the he sticks with music first and foremost, and he continues to get better because songs like First Class, at the very least, do exhibit some kind of special talent. And whether that was all the producer or Jack was super involved with that, I can't say. But that really showed me that there's still, I think, more to back it up. Where some of the other songs, albeit competent and all that, are still a little bland to me. But First Class, I was like, okay, yeah, like he's definitely advancing. So I want to see that continue.
he's got such good ad libs. That moment on First Class where like it drops in, and he's like, uh huh. I just find myself saying that all the time, just because it's like
Hmm.
it's such a good ad lib,
You find yourself saying sweet semen as
man.
much?
Not nearly as much, but yeah, I'm not ruling it out quite yet.
Yeah.
So, uh,
You get your pineapple juice game on soon.
anything, Jesus Christ, it's too early for this. We're gonna be moving on, but follow our Nostalgia Best of 2022 playlist. We're gonna be switching to the world of the Lakers and winning time, the rise of the Lakers dynasty. First season wrapping up on HBO. A lot of I don't know if controversy is the right word, but a lot of talk around the depiction of some characters in this season. We reviewed the first episode. You can go back and check that out. But Dave, now that we've seen the whole thing, do you feel like Winning Time was able to tell this story in a
Hmm.
way that held true to the story, but also was entertaining?
It's definitely entertaining. And I would say it was definitely controversial. I don't think there's any debate about whether it was controversial or not, whether it was justified or not. It's a different story. But I think more than anything else, it lived up to my expectations because I think this show is a blast and has a lot of great performances. And there's so much real life drama here that is, in fact, true. That even if some of it's not true, I couldn't care less. Honestly, I'm not watching a documentary. You know, they change things around and remember the Titans. No one seems to care about that, do they? you know, yeah, I really enjoyed Wing Time, which we know is season one. Season two is coming, and it kind of gets you thinking about, huh? Are they gonna do like 5 years, 5 seasons of the show about 5 real life NBA seasons? Are they gonna skip ahead? Are they eventually gonna like make the show an anthology and do a whole different era about the Lakers or a different team? Don't know. But right now, where we're at now, I think it's a real good time. John C. Riley as Dr. Buss and Quincy Isaiah as Magic Johnson, both
Yeah,
dynamite performances.
absolutely. And I think there's a lot of good performances in this, and a lot that I want to talk to. But those two are far and away, I think the two that stand out. The big hook on this when we first got it was Adam McKay, executive producer, and he directed the first episode. I actually almost feel like Adam McKay not directing the rest of it worked out really well.
Mm.
You have those Adam McKay flourishes in the first episode, and it's a little heavy handed at points. And I feel like as the season goes on, they kind of start going to a more traditional, but kind of keeping some of those flares here and there. A couple of the like quick cuts or like like talk to the camera moments, things like that. but overall they kind of work it out, work those flourishes out, and I think that actually works to tell because this story is interesting enough as is. You don't really need all the like talk to the camera moments, breaking the fourth wall moments to make this interesting. And the story is dynamite. I mean, like we all kind of anyone that follows the NBA, I think, kind of knows a lot of the hubbub around the stuff, not all the intricate details
Right.
of everything, but it's there's enough in here where you don't really need to put these flourishes in. Do you agree with that, or did you feel like you missed those flourishes as the season went on?
No, I totally agree. And like you said, Dr. Bus magic, the look at the camera, directly speak to the camera. Memorable moment where Dr. Bus in his anger like punches the fake cameraman and the camera falls to the ground. You
What are
also have
you
like on the
looking at?
yeah, you have like these filmmaking flourishes where like a different film stock is used or at least presented and it gets all grainy for a second. I think it's completely fine because we're also in the late 70s into the 80s, so it's just gonna have like a period detail to it overall. The basketball uniforms, not the uniforms they wear today, slightly different. Um, no no cell phones, right? We're in a different time, so there's already enough to like make it feel different and also foreign to younger people that like I don't we didn't need anything extra because like you said, there's already so much meat on the bone and there's so much drama that yeah, it's completely fine as is.
So, you mentioned that controversy. Who do you feel like is justified in maybe their dislike of the portrayal of them on the show?
Right. I mean, well, obviously all the headlines are about Jerry West, played by Jason Clark. Jerry West announcing that he will be suing HBO and Warner Discovery now, if he doesn't get a retraction from HBO, and HBO basically fired back and said they stand by the show, they stand by the book it's based off, the Jeff Pearlman Showtime book, but also said that there are some things dramatized, and we'll see if we get anything else. I mean, Bill Plaschke in the LA Times, Mark Stein, a lot of NBA, Bob Ryan, a lot of NBA people that were there at the time are up in arms about this. Kareem himself, to the surprise of no one, did chime in as well. Um, and it seems to be Jerry West is the main thing people are focusing on, which is kind of funny because Dr. Bus is portrayed as his reputation entails in real life as a philandering,
Oh
misogynistic
yeah.
man. But that's also what I think everyone understood about Dr. Bus, and people don't really have a whole lot to say about that. At least not as much as they do about Jerry West. And Jerry West is portrayed as very angry, or at least prone to having a meltdown and or a tantrum of some kind. And for me, I fell behind on the show a little bit, then I caught up, and like I caught up after more and more headlines and anger had come out. I was like, oh, is there gonna be like another like big bus thing or a big West thing that happens? And no, like it's just basically what's established from the early on, and there's really nothing new. And I think it's just people are don't like what they see, or is this like I understand Jerry West, who's still a living person, being like, "That's not me. Fuck you. This hurts." And then people that know him feeling the same way, but like I don't really think it's that justified because I think it's a great performance. And if you're gonna sprinkle a little fiction in, that's fine because you're gonna do that regardless. And also, the fact that he's that this mad about this makes you think that maybe he got really mad about other things too, such as what we see on the show. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand the early season portrayal of him being upset with that. I mean, it's depicting him having mental health issues, which I don't know if he's been open about that or not. It really made him look like he was. I don't want to say like being a big baby, but like kind of just being a big baby at times, like especially when he didn't get his way in terms of who he wanted to draft and things like that. But I actually
Right.
think as the series goes on,
Moncrief.
yeah, I think as the series goes on, West is kind of portrayed as this person who was kind of like the overseer of like keeping things together, and I think his portrayal gets toned down a bit from the like cartoonish, portrayal at the very beginning of the season. So I mean, I can understand why he's upset, but I don't think it's that bad. Um, but like you said, it does make you think maybe this guy doesn't have as thick of a skin as you might think. When you hear this
Right.
coming out, in terms of the Jerry West thing, I mean, very open about his philandering ways in the show to the point
Jerry
where
Buss, you mean?
sorry, yes, Jerry Buss, thank you. Please don't sue me, Jerry West. I'll retract it if you want. Um, but that scene where Jeannie comes up to him in the restaurant as a child and he's getting a hand job from this woman, I was just like blown away by that. I was like, whoa, this is, I mean, if anyone's gonna have an issue, I feel like it would be Jerry Buss and his family, obviously at this point, since Jerry Buss is deceased. But
Right.
that was like the moment I was like, ooh, that's pretty bad.
Right. I think also too, it's important to note that like the timeline here is a bit fumbled. Like Jeannie was not
Oh
around the
yeah.
team in a professional capacity at this time. This is like several years before she actually was involved with the team. On the other hand, I think the performance is awesome and the character is very strong. And I think an important part of the show. I really like the Genie character we have here, even if it's kind of fictional. So yeah, I feel like the Bus family, they probably don't care quite as much because Dr. Bus is no longer with us. You know. Also, it's not like most of his behavior is acceptable. So do you really want to go out and well, I guess in that sense you'd be like, oh well, he didn't do that, but no one's going to say that because we know he did this. So you know, I also think Jeannie Buss, who does own and run the Lakers, she's also been in the public eye so long that she probably just doesn't care and she can
Yeah.
nod off and say I didn't watch it. Magic himself hasn't said a whole lot about this except to promote his own kind of series that he's created that no one seems to have any interest in. But
Yeah.
they're famous people. They're used to this stuff. It kind of just
Mhm.
brushes off them. I was surprised to see Kareem, honestly, have a strong bother to wade in. I guess not that he wouldn't have a take or an eloquent thing to say, but just that like he would actually concern himself with this too.
Yeah, I mean, he's a thoughtful guy and very outspoken. Speaks up about a lot of like social political issues, which I think is fantastic. Become a really good writer in this like
Yeah,
stage of
and
his
the
life.
show's very about that too, about the
Yeah,
multitudes that was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
yeah, and actually, if anything, I think that there's more to explore with that. So I'm really glad we're getting a second season because I think uh, Kareem and the Magic dynamic and how Magic is obviously going to be the one kind of leading the team in future seasons as Kareem's career is, moving to a different stage is going to be a really interesting dynamic. I actually one of my favorite moments in the season was like in those middle episodes when Magic started taking on Kareem and really like standing
Mm.
up to him and trying to like get him to buy into the team and kind of move past these like begrudging kind of grumpy ways that he had at that point around basketball and his perception of how he saw himself within the game. I thought that was really, really fascinating.
Yep.
And obviously, I think the standout storyline is the coaching stuff, the McKinney, Westhead, Pat Riley trio, and how they figured out who was going to do that. Now, not totally accurate to how it went down, but I think they made it very, very captivating in the show.
Oh, totally. As soon as Tracy Letts shows up as Jack McKinney, the show really elevates.
Yeah.
Because at that point, too, we get a whole new storyline, a lot more drama established, and we don't spend quite as much time with Magic's personal life, which was like very heavy in the early part of
Yeah.
the season. And again, I love Quincy Isaiah. I think he's fantastic as Magic, and you need a good performer and the right performer to be Magic, given everything that was Magic Johnson. Is a very famous person almost right away. But once we have this other dynamic going on beyond Magic and the Bus family, and it's this coaching drama that's building up, I think the show really elevates. And Siegel's Westhead. I don't know how accurate that portrayal is, but for the show's purposes, the McKinney Westhead dynamic is very successful, and then Riley joining in and becoming more confident in his abilities and what he wants from the game after retirement also is really awesome. Now, Adrian Brody as Riley, early on, it's not quite as like confident, cocksure as we associate with Pat Riley today. However, I only know Pat Riley as an older man that puts his rings on the table and tells people to join his team. Like I don't know about early Riley. Like so, in the sense, I get why some people could be frustrated with things that are changed, just because this is going to shape the opinion of a lot of people that were not alive in the 1980s and only know about all of this secondhand anyway. So I understand that, but for the sake of narrative dramatic television, everything with the coaching staff and those three actors is spot on.
Yeah, I agree, and I really love the dynamic. You know, I love when Siegel as Westhead has the medical emergency. It's a
Yeah,
is that a kidney stone? Is
it
that what it
is.
is? Yeah,
It is.
and man, that whole episode where Pat Riley's trying to get Westhead to like make a decision, like you're not gonna like let me go, right? And then like Westhead's feeling so loyal to McKinney. It's just really well done. And then I think the stuff with so to kind of switch gears, I think the stuff with Jerry Buss and his mom, while I don't know if it totally lands, does kind of build out Buss as a character beyond just being this philandering, ridiculous like businessman, which I
Hmm.
think is necessary for the show. But I don't know if that totally hit home. Did that totally work for you?
Yeah, like you said, I think that you understand why it's there for the character. And when you have Sally Field, of all
Right.
people, elevating the material like only she can,
Mhm.
it's pretty forgivable for me. Um, I don't mind at the end too because we're still getting a lot of stuff with the team, and everything we are getting with the team and the coaching staff is like fairly juicy and like important feeling that I don't mind. Also, because like you can see where it's going. This is not going to be a plot line like next season or anything. So
Well, especially because she's dead now. So,
right.
um, yeah, I guess like I just wanted to like see for you a lot of the talk before the show was about who was playing Jerry Buss, with John C. Riley being tapped and Will Ferrell being very upset with Adam McKay about this, to the point where their friendship at this point seems to be non-existent. Could you have seen Will Ferrell as Jerry Buss in this?
I mean, I could have seen it. It would just be a completely different show,
Yeah.
and I don't really want that show. Riley has dramatic chops, much more effective than Will Ferrell's dramatic chops, which we've seen in bits and fits and starts. Riley is great as this. He can do the comedic stuff, he can do the gregarious stuff, and he can do the dramatic stuff too.
Yeah.
And he also looks the part of the doctor. So yeah, I thought he was spot on as this, and you really need this performance to work for this version of Winning Time that they made, without question.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Will Ferrell, I think if he was cast, would have made this a little bit more cartoony, and the dramatic moments would not have hit nearly as much. So
Hmm.
definitely, I think made the right call. Although definitely sad to see that him and McKay are still. It seems to have still not have resolved this. What other thoughts do you have on this season? I mean, I'm looking forward to season two. But what else stood out to you?
Well, I think just like the depth of the cast is like really impressive. You
Mhm.
know, we made a lot about John C. Riley's awesome, Quincy Isaiah and Solomon Hughes as Magic and Kareem. Very
Great.
important bits of casting. They did an awesome job. We mentioned Jason Clark, who, whether you think it's accurate or offensive or not, I think Jason Clark's awesome as this version of Jerry West. Uh, Brody, Letts, Siegel, Gabby Hoffman as Claire Rothman, I thought was awesome. Devon Nixon, the son of Norm Nixon, playing his dad, very impressive.
Yeah.
uh, Hadley Robinson as Jeannie, really good. Then you have all these completely overqualified people in these very small roles. We've mentioned Sally Field as Dr. Buss's mom. You have recent Emmy winner Julianne Nicholson as Cranny, Jack
Mhm.
McKinney's wife. And really, it's just her being the wife character. There's not much to it. Rob Morgan is there as Magic's dad. You know,
Mhm.
even Molly Gordon, a rising actress, is just like one of the employees at the team that's interfacing with Jeannie. Like, there's a lot of talent here, and in season two they'll bring in more people for new characters as the story goes in real life. Um, we'll have
And that
I'm sure a lot of additional A-listers joining. Very exciting.
for sure. And you know that the Boston LA dynamic is going to be played up as they're going to be fighting for titles here in the 80s.
Michael Chiklis
Chickless.
says our back is here.
Exactly. You know, a moment that really stands out to me and made me laugh, but also I just was like, this is this is the type of McKay stuff that I'm glad wasn't more in the show. Is that scene? I think it's in episode 8 or 9 when they show that the Celtics lost in the playoffs to the 76ers, and Larry Bird looks at Magic through the TV and says, "See you next year, shithead," or whatever he says to him. And I think the Larry Bird like portrayal of this is like so ridiculous, but also kind of fun. Like they're just making him a complete villain, which is like, okay,
Yep.
sure. Like from the perspective of the hero of this story, it makes sense that they would do that.
Hmm.
But it's a really funny portrayal to me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they have him walking around dipping into a Budweiser can, always drinking beer, which we knew that early days Larry did
Yeah.
drink a lot, to the
Hmm.
detriment of his playing career. Um, but I like that because they also still bring in the real life stuff too about how Magic was pitted against Larry, and Larry was propped up as the great white hope for the NBA and Middle America. The success of the league. They don't shy away from that, which is like the real important thing with this whole dynamic in the early days. So, I thought they're going to make uh, Larry Bird a bit of a caricature. I don't care because it's not a Celtic show anyway. So what's it
Yeah.
matter?
I agree. But just one other moment that really stuck out to me, I thought was like a cool moment that kind of made my jaw drop in a sense, was when they were figuring out how they're going to sell the Lakers and how they what vibe they wanted to give around the team, and they come up with the idea of the Laker girls, right? These
Mm,
dancers who are not your traditional cheerleaders at that time, and how Paula Abdul was the person who kind of led the original Laker
yeah,
girls.
it's
I
true.
totally blew my mind. Jaw dropping moment for someone who was not aware of that, and just like it makes you just want to dive into more about this story. So I thought that was really well
Right.
done how they dropped that in.
Right. And I think that's what's cool too about this real life story and its setting is that you're just prone to having all these really cool and fun cameos and small roles, whether it's Paul Abdul, effectively by chance being in this story, or Jack Nicholson in his
Mm.
heyday
Yeah,
being Jack, or Richard Pryor coming around and perhaps tempting Spencer Haywood a little bit too much. I love seeing that. Like the LA of it all, they don't shy away from either. So I'm looking forward to more of that too once the showtime is showtime and it's super hot.
yeah, absolutely. I think we're both looking forward to season 2. Highly recommend catching up on this if you care about basketball or even just like drama in general. I think you could enjoy this, but definitely really, really fun first season of Winning Time. Dave, you ready to move on? Let's go to Disney. Disney Plus. We're gonna start on the small screen before we get to the big screen. And Moon Knight season 1 has wrapped up. Oscar Isaac leading this show. Dave, we reviewed the first episode. I think there was some hope that this was going to be a bit of a change up for the Disney Plus Marvel MCU TV shows. Did season 1 deliver on that promise for you?
Mm. Well, it's definitely different than the previous 4 live action MCU Disney Plus series. That's for sure. And it's not really connected at all to the greater canon, which is nice because that was kind of all that was propping up Hawkeye for even existing, for example. So it's not any of that. It's definitely different. And I respect that creative decision for Marvel. That being said, Moon Knight and the end just didn't come together for me, and I found it just kind of lacking in the. It's just not as compelling as I wanted it to be, which is a big disappointment for a premise featuring Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke about a man possessed by an Egyptian god in the presence of a lot of Egyptian mythology and stuff. Like, oh, on paper sounds pretty fun and at least interesting for an MCU property to tackle, but I just didn't really enjoy the back half of the series, and like they go in a super high concept direction. Kind of takes you by surprise, starting with episode 4. I respect it for trying to do something different, but I just really wasn't as compelled as I wanted to be by this show.
I think it has a lot of the same problems that some of these other Disney Plus MCU shows have, which is they they go for something or they have an idea of what they want to go for and they can execute it to a point, but it seems like in the end everything kind of comes back to being what the MCU and Marvel kind of is, which is, a CGI punch fest a lot of the time. And
Mm,
um, while some of that stuff I think worked to some degree, there were just moments where I found myself kind of like eye rolling, right? And you think about the finale and like all these ideas they're trying to like kind of wrap up, and you get this like these two Egyptian gods having this fight at the end, and I feel very uninvested, like not invested in either one of them, to be honest. And it just felt like, okay, I want to see how like the Oscar Isaac Ethan Hawke aspect plays out more. I thought the episode 5, where it felt just like an episode of Legion in a lot of ways,
mm, yeah.
was playing out. I was like, there's something to this where I feel really mind fucked about like what's actually going on and what's not in this sense. And I would have dug a little bit more of this in the season. I understand why they didn't want to just copy Legion and have the same exact concept, but there's something to that, especially with this character who is dealing with dissociative personality disorder, where it's there's a lot more to explore there, and I just feel like they kind of like, I don't know, pulled their punches at times to just fit into the
Mm.
MCU.
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of missed opportunities with it too. You know, the man, uh, Mark Spector slash Stephen Grant, possessed by Khonshu, Egyptian god. That should have been a lot more fun. It's not as fun
Yeah,
as like Venom
it's
in the head
not.
of Tom Hardy. You
Yeah,
know, it's just not that fun, not that cool, and it should have been. It's kind of
yeah.
lame. You know,
Khonshu as a character just I think didn't really grab me that much. I just
right?
kind of found him annoying.
Yeah, I guess the best element for me is like how you learn about the origin of Mark Spector and how Stephen Grant uh, kind of conjured up this alter ego in the face of domestic trauma as a child.
Yep.
Okay, nice little twist, nice little fake out, given how much time he had spent with both personalities without really knowing what's going on. Not too bad. Uh, but I think that it just never truly like grapples well enough with like the Egyptian mythology. Like we have that when we're introduced to all the other gods and like their avatars and stuff. But like, it should be a big moment for the series and for the MCU, and it's just not. Like it just it's not cool. And also, it's not consequential. All the other fucking avatars seem to be dead, and I don't really even know what the status is of the other gods. It's kind of unclear too. But I would have rather this show be a lot grander, or at least committed to the weirdness that you said is kind of like Legion, because that would just feel a bit transgressive for the MCU standards. But it can't go that way either because we have to have our CGI fight in the final episode, as you said. So, one observation I saw pointed out, I didn't really make this connection myself, but they kind of haphazardly established that Mark Spector is Jewish, which has comic roots. And I think, honestly, when the Moon Knight character was created in the comics, he wasn't established as Jewish. And then later writers kind of made him Jewish because he had been given a Jewish last name, kind of inadvertently. Regardless, Jewish in the comics, they make him Jewish in the show, but they don't actually grapple with the fact that this follower of the Jewish faith is possessed by the god of a different religion, and he
Yeah.
learns without a shadow of a doubt that these other gods from a different religion are in fact real. There's no
Hmm.
grappling with his faith, but I thought that would, at the very least, be very interesting to see. And there's definitely a lot of meat on that bone. So, kind of an interesting missed opportunity. You would never think Marvel would even present something like that.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, and I think it just kind of goes to show, not only is this, I guess, a 6 episode uh, season of television, a bit limited in terms of the time, but where they choose to kind of use that time to explore things. And I think it would have been really interesting for them to not only have him trying to figure out what these two identities are and kind of, I don't know, synthesize them together, or come to accept both
Mm.
of them together, but also like how those identities are impacted by that part of his identity, and this realization would have been really fascinating and would have been a huge swing for Marvel. Um, you think about like some of the moments they chose to explore and things that they didn't. I mean, we get so much time in the first like episode where he's like in the museum and like having this like big fight, which I mean, certainly I think for the first episode you have to have something that grabs people and makes people excited for some of the action that's about to come ahead in the season. But I really would have loved to have gotten a little bit more of like Mark and Hawk actually just like talking and like exploring these ideologies. And like obviously like Khonshu has one perspective, and I forget who Ethan Hawke was possessed
Uh,
by.
Amit.
Yes. And like I get that, like the idea of like judging people based on future crimes, but is this person really like seeing into the future? Is this God able to see
Hmm.
that and see that these people are
Oh, with the
going to be bad?
scales. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and like is that going to actually like I think there's a lot to debate there, a little bit more than like the Thanos is crazy. It's like, well, some people think Thanos might have had a point. So maybe there's a way to like explore that like these ideas aren't totally bad, even if they're a bit deranged in some ways based on
Mm.
the way we currently see things. I also think they just never really leaned into what they wanted the show to be. And when they committed to something for an episode, I think it really worked. Like the tomb heist episode, I thought was really really fun, and I was like,
Mm.
I wish they had almost just committed to this being like a national treasure type thing almost
Yeah.
in some ways.
Sure.
It could have been a little bit more interesting, but like Marvel things, it's a little bit of everything and
Mm.
never really what you totally want to be.
Right. I mean, also thinking about it too, we don't actually get a whole lot of Moon Knight as Moon Knight. He's barely in the suit, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And I think to some people, seeing a
disappointing.
very protracted Moon Knight origin with very little Moon Knight is probably just not appealing, you know? And there's some criticism of the CGI. I didn't really mind it, but you can notice it a little bit, I guess. May Calmaway as Layla, kind of a light character as well to the very end until she becomes the Scarlet Scarab, which looked pretty cool
Are
and
you
all
an
that.
Egyptian superhero?
Right.
What?
Here's our representation, which
Yeah,
is great and all, but like just kind of ham fisted.
yeah.
Um, yeah, man. I just at the end of the day, I was like, man, Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, two of our great actors, they're just fucking slumming it, man. Just
Mhm.
not like special material. It's just disappointing.
I gotta say, when the season ended, and then you had that mid credit scene where
Right.
Hawk is in the mental health facility and gets wheeled out, and they're like, it seemed like they were gonna like be saving him for a season two. I was like, is Ethan Hawke really gonna do a season two of this? Like, is he really gonna commit to this? And then no, you get the reveal that there's another identity, Jake Lockley, who I think a lot of people actually associate most with Moon Knight. So I
Yeah,
think
there were
that
some hints in the series too.
yeah, so I think that sets it up nicely for what the showdown of the second season will be: Jake Lockley
Right.
versus Mark and Steven. But I was glad that I think Hawk kind of closed the door on a second season. I
Right.
think the
Important to note too, there is no like second year option on Isaac's contract. He is not currently on hold with Marvel at all for a second
yeah,
season, and there's no second season announced. The other EPs of the series, like Mohammed Diab, they have no idea if they're making a second season or not, despite obviously nods to making another one. So we'll get Moon Knight in some form, I have to imagine, but I think reception and popularity of the series will probably dictate whether that's a season two of the series or perhaps an appearance in some other property, like a movie or another series, whether that's Oscar Isaac again or just Layla, who can say, so seems like there's a lot of TBD with that, or at least they're keeping their cards close to the vest. We got announcement of Loki season two, like the first weekend after the finale came out. So very different circumstance this time around. Um, but at the very least, I do give him credit for making a show that was very
Oh
self-contained
yeah.
within the MCU. It is refreshing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they at least were like going for something here, exploring different aspects of the world and of the MCU world. So give them a lot of credit. Up next in the DC, or sorry, not the DC, in the MCU TV series is Mrs. Marvel. Are you
Yep.
excited?
I think it'll be cool, excuse me, just because the Kamala Khan character is very popular, but because it's a very young character, I hope it's all ages fair and not for kids.
Yeah, I agree. I'm I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see. I'm not exactly sure what to expect with it quite yet. So Disney as usually tries to do everything for everyone, so I'm sure that they'll try to rope a little bit in, but it feels like it could be a kids show happening. Why don't we switch gears to the from the small screen to the big screen where this past Thursday, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness finally dropped. And Dave, Sam Raimi behind the camera for this one, directing this. A lot of hype for this. This had been pushed back, was supposed to be coming out before Spider-Man into the Spider-Man No Way Home. So we're kind of getting this not in the order that they first expected. Did this movie, did Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness really take you into the Multiverse of Madness? Do you feel like it went as crazy as you expected?
That's a great question. I would say it's not as multiversal as you're led to believe. We're really only in a few different universes in this. And we see all these flashes of all these other things very briefly, but we're not really in anything too crazy. But I did enjoy my time with this film. Very messy film, a lot going on, but I think it's pretty fun if you just kind of roll with it and try not to overanalyze its muddled plot.
Yeah, I thought that this was a lot of fun. I think that there's some really, really, really cool and inventive moments, and some times when you're just like, man, Sam Raimi and the way that he thinks of things and how inventive and creative he is just like singular. And then there were times when I was like, he can't totally escape the MCU though. There's still
Right.
times when he's got to kind of play the game. So I think there's a lot to like in it and a lot to not like. Why don't we start with the things that we thought really, really worked in
Right.
this? What did you like about the
Well,
film?
I think that's a good place to start. Is Sam Raimi, of course, his return to superhero films after, for all intents and purposes, establishing where we are today with this Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. But Raimi at least does as well a job as Kevin Feige and friends will let you do with putting your own stamp on a Marvel movie, and he picks his spots well. Obviously, he really does no say on most of the plot and conclusions and stuff, but Raimi brings a lot of his talents, apart from Spider Man, obviously, as a horror film director. And he really, I think, brings a lot of that in a pretty compelling way per MCU standards, you know, whether it's like the a twist on like the Hall of Mirrors or overtly like demonic stuff towards the end. Like I I I quite enjoyed him at least trying his best to sprinkle in some less familiar elements to the MCU. He's not the first one to put a stamp on a movie. I think Coogler and Black Panther comes to mind, of course, and Waititi and Thor Ragnarok as well, and I guess James Gunn. But apart from them, it's been a little while since we've had someone really kind of stand out as a director on this. Chloe Zhao tried with Eternals, natural lighting and all, but didn't really work out in the end. But I think Raimi, he certainly brought his skills to this film.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think when you think about Sam Raimi, a few of the things that really come to mind are the the essence of horror, but also his take on action and like making action still like fun and lighthearted, and it doesn't have to be totally like uh totally serious all the time. And I think you get a lot of that in both of these. Not only like you talked about like the demonic aspects of the ending, but there are times when this movie is just straight up scary. Like that scene where Wanda is chasing them through that tunnel, and then they're like kind of like trapped where like underneath the bridge or wherever the water is, and you're just like, where is Wanda? Like that moment is like truly scary. I think the way that he portrays like the fight scene between Doctor Strange and evil Doctor Strange is really really inventive, and that take to that point I was talking about where conceptualizing lighthearted like fighting and violence, using the score and the music that's being played as a way of like conceptualizing the fight, I just thought was like absolutely brilliant and so
Mm,
cool. And I literally just like had a huge smile watching it. I was like, this is something I'd never seen or never even thought of in a movie, and this is why this guy is so
yeah.
great.
Right. And it kind of reminds me of what I liked a lot about Scott Derrickson's Doctor Strange, the first film, which
Mhm.
introduced us to the character straight up. And I think some people kind of view that as a bit archetypal origin story per MCU standards, very similar to how Iron Man functions in the early Stephen Strange characterization, pretty similar to Tony Stark. But visually, the first Doctor Strange is very fun and cool. And I think that, and Derrickson, also a horror filmmaker, that probably factors into this, but they know that they can at least attempt to dress up something cool and interesting with Doctor Strange, given what that character's powers are in the universe. So they do it, and Raimi just super capable at this. And like you said, the music fight I thought was spectacular. Just one of the most interesting pieces of combat there's been in the entire MCU. To
Oh
be
yeah.
honest, usually the CGI fighting in Act Three, not people's favorite moments
Mhm.
in Marvel properties. This is a rare exception.
And even thinking about that beforehand, and a bit more of a terrifying take on the action is when Wanda is facing the Illuminati, which we'll talk a little bit more about the Illuminati in a little bit and what that might mean for the MCU. But just the way that she goes about defeating them and actually killing them, I thought was at least inventive, although definitely more violent and a little bit more harrowing. Seeing Reed Richards just get turned into noodles is a tough look in a lot of ways. I forgot who the guy who can kill someone with just his voice is, but
Black
um,
Bolt, the
yeah,
Inhumans guy.
the way Black Bolt dies is really really rough. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like inventiveness in terms of the action, how these
Mm.
these heroes are utilizing their powers. Um, yeah, and I think to kind of keep on the Raimi aspect, I also think the way that this movie looks, while there's sometimes when it feels, I think, a bit MCU-ish, I think you can definitely feel his camera work and his touch throughout. There's a lot of
Mm.
like close-ups and a lot of like ways that the camera moves about through the action that feels very in line with him, kind of putting it like right in the person's face, like shaking it, feeling like you're in the scene a lot of the times, which I
Mm.
think really stood out to me as well. What else did you like about the movie? What else worked for you?
Yeah. So I think a creative decision for the MCU that was smart was to lean into Wanda Maximoff as a villain because WandaVision, the series, the first Disney Plus MCU series, did not redeem Wanda at the end of after everything that happens at Westview. And I think that was a bit of a criticism for a lot of people, including myself. It's like, hey, like Wanda was like bad news in this series and like shouldn't be like forgiven for her personal self good intentions, right? And the movie also leans into that. I thought that was great. Great idea to make her the villain. And honestly, this WandaVision Doctor Strange 2 arc for the character is the best material that this character has had after not being much of a presence at all in all the other Avengers movies. So I thought it was really compelling that the Scarlet Witch was the true villain of the story, and they do a really good job of having the magic and sorcery stuff feel pretty compelling.
Uh, I do think it was a good choice to have her as the villain. I don't know if the portrayal of her what was driving her decisions is necessarily one that I thought was well thought out.
It's very fraught still ever since the show.
Yeah, and to be completely honest, like I think it's a not a great look for the MCU to basically be taking motherhood and using that as a way to like drive a villain into doing some of the worst things that we've seen on screen from someone who was once a hero in these films. I mean, Wanda is trying to kill a teenager throughout the course of this movie. She is trying to she kills a lot of people in this movie. And you know, WandaVision, for as uh much as she was a villain in that, no one actually ends up really dying. People were, you know, mind controlled for a month, just mind controlled for a month before, you know, but like they don't actually die. She's actually murking dudes in this, and I don't know if I think they should have thought out a little bit more like what was driving her and what her motivation was, and maybe rethought like being like, oh, she just wants to be with her kids again, that's driving her like crazy or driving her to do this. I think it is a bit regressive. But I do think it was smart because you know, when you think about it, eh, if they had made it like, oh, there's this demon out there and Strange and Wanda have to team up, I mean, it just becomes a general MCU versus some, you know, CGI villain that you can't connect with. So I think this definitely made the movie a little bit more grounded for me, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I also enjoyed like the presence as like other Doctor Stranges as like
Yeah,
your antagonist at the end there. You know, the music fight we talked about, but like evil Doctor Strange, which is technically referenced in Marvel What If. You don't need to have watched What If, honestly, to have watched this
no,
movie. But again, like we're not throwing anyone else in here. It's all kind of self-contained uh, between Wanda and Strange. And again, smart. You know, I guess the biggest newcomer of consequence to this story is certainly the America Chavez character,
yeah,
and completely introduced for the series. And she, in a sense, is almost a MacGuffin presence, right? We have the the two books, right? The Darkhold and the Book of Vishanti, the good and bad book, basically. But then we also have America Gomez and her powers to teleport between dimensions, although out of her control. You know, I thought the performance from Xochitl Gomez was pretty solid, pretty good, and I wouldn't mind seeing her pop up in like one of these Young Avengers properties we're surely gonna get soon.
yeah,
But I think for the sake of Doctor Strange 2, America Gomez is she's kind of like on the short end of the stick. You know, like the stuff with her parents is it's very basic and quick, and you know I feel like the beats of the Gomez character are like pretty straightforward.
yeah. Just saying, just want to clarify. It's America Chavez, and the actress's name is Zatil uh, Gomez.
Yep.
I have a hard time pronouncing that. You were just saying America Gomez, but no
Oh,
big
sorry.
deal.
Yep.
Yeah, easy to get those confused, but yeah, I agree. I don't know if America really did much, and it's actually interesting to think about when these movies are supposed to come out in terms of No Way Home too, because right, I see Strange's the way that he's approaching Peter in No Way Home and the way he's approaching kind of mentoring America very similarly. And if this movie had come out first, I think it would have actually confused a little bit the way Strange acted towards Peter in No
Mm.
Way Home, because he's a bit cold and just kind of like, "What are you doing? Like this is ridiculous. Like figure it out." Whereas with America, he's a little bit more like, you know, trying to be nurturing and understanding. Now he doesn't he doesn't at this point know who Peter Parker is based on the spell he casts. So I don't know if it would have made sense. I don't know if his character development makes sense either way. But I do think it's just interesting to think about. But yeah, America, we'll see her again. I just don't know if I was super fascinated by her storyline.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I think one of the major presences in this Strange versus the older Strange is Rachel McAdams, and I was
Yeah.
wondering how you felt about her presence in this. Do you feel like she was worth kind of building back into this?
Yeah, yeah, as Christine Palmer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things where like the Christine Palmer character in Doctor Strange 1, pretty straightforward, you know what to expect kind of thing. I guess the like out of body surgery experience, probably the best her best moments in the first film. I like that I at least for the continuity's sake kind of brought her in and gave it the best grace note they could. They also don't really spend too much time with her for all intents and purposes, which I think is good because like the character ultimately was not like super established. I mean, I don't think Christine Palmer's gonna have a big comeback the way Jane Foster is
Mm.
having the comeback in Thor 4, for
Yeah.
example. So it's I think it was fine. I mean, I like Rachel McAdams. She's a great actress. So it's not much of a part, but
No.
I guess once we go to the other universe and we see a different version of Christine, I thought that was kind of a smart way to give McAdams at least a little bit more to do.
Yeah, I was happy to see her. I just was kind of like, I could have taken this or left it. I mean, this is really like a strange character development device.
Right.
His presence with Mick Adams and America it totally is. And I think it was nice to like be be like forcing him to confront not only that relationship, which could have been the only one that they forced him to confront, but also facing his relationship with everybody else in terms of how people see him and kind of going through these different uh, universes and seeing that in almost all of them in some way his presence is seen as like detrimental based on the
Hmm.
way that he behaves. I thought that was
Hmm.
pretty interesting to think about and to actually like see that flashback with the Illuminati of like Strange on the planet after Thanos had been killed, and then choosing to kill him because they thought it was best for the sake of all the
Yeah.
universes was really interesting and thought provoking for sure. Um, we haven't talked much about Cumberbatch in this. I mean, how did
Yeah.
you feel
Yeah.
about his performance?
Yeah. I mean, I've always liked his performances because I feel like he can do what you want from Stephen Strange. In the first film, it's very much like this is kind of like Tony Stark, and
Mhm.
Cumberbatch does that arrogance well, and he obviously is the key figure in this film, as the title would suggest. And I like Cumberbatch, and I think he did good with giving you a few different performances because he's playing a few different versions of Strange. So yeah, I think he did well once again.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think he said in an interview recently that he wants to play this character for the next 10 years. And this is something we had kind of talked about in past movies when he's appeared, whether it was Spider-Man or his own movie. It's just like he seems primed at this point, especially as they're exploring more of the multiverses to be
Hmm.
one of those tent pole heroes who might just be showing up in movies every once in a while as
Right.
people are traveling these universes, kind of taking on that new Stark type
Right.
perspective.
And the,
So
and the post credit scene, of course, suggests more to come. And
yeah,
you know, I think for Benedict Cumberbatch, I think it actually works out because Benedict Cumberbatch works a lot, and he makes a lot of more independent movies, adult dramas, and stuff. And then he just pays all his bills with Doctor Strange. He actually seems to have really figured it out well, where he can balance both the creative and monetary sides of his career pretty well.
yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting to see him in get so much acclaim for Power of the Dog, and then jumping right back into MCU stuff. People are full of multitudes. You mentioned the after credit scene, which I think we can just touch on on quick, where Clea shows up. My understanding is Clea is like usually his like main love interest. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think she
Yeah.
becomes the wife of Doctor Strange. At one point, becomes Sorcerer Supreme herself.
And
I mean, for
Charlize
me,
Theron. Whew.
So let's just back it up here. The MCU has introduced three complete A-listers in the last, 7 months. Harry Styles at the end of Eternals, and then in this film, John Krasinski and Charlize Theron. Charlize Theron, the signature female action star in the last 10 years.
Yep.
Fucking dropping bags, man, taking names. I was very impressed. Like, Charlize Theron? Holy shit.
Yeah, when she showed up, I was like, "Wow, that's a sign that they're really investing in this moving forward." So, really, really good stuff. Just real quick, I think one of the things I just wanted to touch on, and it actually doesn't have to be real quick. I think we should go more into it. Is the Illuminati were fucking chumps, bro. I mean, it's a great moment, right? When he goes to Earth, whatever it is, like 163 or whatever the number is.
Let me
Not
look it
like
up.
it.
Yes, Earth,
But
Other Earth. They established a comic thing of named universes and stuff.
yes,
This was Earth 838.
838, and he gets Morto tricks him and drugs him with the tea. You can
Mhm.
never trust Morto, it seems, um, and brings him in front of the council, the Illuminati.
Yep.
And the Illuminati is Professor X and Reed Richards and Morto and the other people you mentioned
Black
before.
Bolt, Captain Carter, and
Yes, Captain
a
Carter, of course.
a different Captain Marvel played by Rambo.
Yes, and so you got these characters all incredibly powerful, and they just get got so easily, dude. What chumps, absolute chumps.
You know, on
Earth
the other
838
on the
bogus.
other hand, I enjoyed seeing it because there's been a lot of talk throughout the years, like like when people do like March Madness brackets for Marvel characters, like, well, Wanda's always gonna win. She's the most powerful, and they
Yeah.
actually finally did it. It's like, yeah, you know what? And like Strange said it himself. It's like between the Archer and the magical witch,
Yeah.
it's an easy choice. They finally did it. They basically put their dick on the table and be like, you know what? This is like our most powerful person currently
Yep.
alive, and here you go. You get to see it manifested. So I actually didn't mind it. I really like seeing the in the mind scene between
Yeah.
Wanda and Charles Xavier because it's very reminiscent, of course, what we saw with the X-Men films that Patrick Stewart was in, of course, and a good way to have like her fight and defeat
Yeah.
Professor X. I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think it was. I wish they put up a little bit more of a fight. I mean, literally, like Reed Richards just that's going to be his strategy. He's the smartest guy in the universe. He's going to go up to this person who he knows is super powerful and just be like, "Come on, don't do this. You're better than this." And she
Good
just
point.
turns him into zoodles, dude. Just turns him
Yeah.
into zoodles. It's tough.
So there was a lot of they did some reshoots for this film like they do for every blockbuster. However, there were some like rumors and suggestions that after No Way Home came out or at least started getting test screened and there was like a super warm response to Tobey Maguire and Garfield being in it that they might have amped up the cameo factor for Doctor Strange 2. It's just kind of been suggested, we don't really know. Um I wonder how that might have been done, whether they maybe even added additional characters straight up and redid the fight or added to it. I'm not really sure. It's a great hypothetical. I don't know if we'll ever find that out. But for something that's ultimately super fan servicey, and because this is a multiversal movie, honestly, completely inconsequential, it's still pretty effective as fan service, right? Like I was anticipating it because they released a clip of the Illuminati, which is very famous in the comics, and I was like, oh, I wonder who it'll be at, because T'Challa is a famous member of the Illuminati in the comics. Obviously, we're not going to see that. So I'm like, huh, who's it going to be? And then they had a Captain Carter, from What If, Haley Atwell, and a different Captain Marvel, Rambo. They had that also like picked out in like trailers and clips. So I was like, okay, we know about those. But seeing Black Bolt as the Inhumans from the Inhumans, pretty cool way to reintroduce the Inhumans after like the failed series and Agents of Shield and all that. Wow, okay. Krasinski though, as Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, completion of numerous years of fan casting for the character. It actually happened. There it is. And then they actually brought back Stewart again as
Yeah.
Professor X. I was like, wow, they really delivered in this department. And like you said, the fight's pretty brief. Um, Perhaps that's kind of by necessity with the film. You can't really have this complete detour with all these other people that don't really matter. I get it, but for the fan service angle, I thought it was still pretty awesome.
I definitely. I mean, it got a huge response in my theater. People were very excited when this scene came on. I think Reed Richards was obviously the the
Yeah.
number one. But then when Patrick Stewart came out, people were like, "Oh shit, like he's back," and that was big. And I mean, it does open up everything that we kind of expected to be happening. We already knew the Fantastic Four movie was going to be happening. Actually, I think John Watts just left that.
He did. Yep.
So again, Fantastic Four movie potentially having some problems early on. We'll see. But then the idea of how they're gonna kind of bring the X-Men in here makes sense, and it feels a little bit. I'm not super familiar with the storyline in the comics, but the Secret Wars or what I'm reading are seem
Mhm.
to be being set up here. The idea of like a Watcher who like puts these people
Right.
together. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems like if they're gonna introduce Fantastic Four is gonna have their own film. That's one thing,
Yeah,
but like X-Men and like Inhumans as well. It's like we're probably just gonna skip a lot of steps by one of these like big event series being
yeah.
put onto film to kind of like speed things up basically and bring all these new characters to the fore. So TBD there. We're honestly kind of due for a announcement from Marvel just because we only actually have titled movies dated through the end of 2023 next year. Usually we know a little bit further in advance. As the phases go. Blade, for example, we don't even have a date for
Blade.
that. And anything post that film, we don't know. So I wouldn't be shocked if sometime this year Disney and Marvel do their own event and kind of lay out their plans a little bit.
Yeah, Feige in an interview just recently said that they have mapped out the next 10 years of
Mhm.
superhero movies. So MCU not planning to slow down anytime soon.
Yeah.
Were you excited to see Reed Richards on screen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking forward to the film just because Fantastic Four at one point were a very popular comic. And honestly, for the time, I did enjoy the two Fantastic Four movies we did get. Obviously, they're very dated, and the second one's not too good, but I liked them, and I want to see that done right. And I actually kind of just like chuckled to myself. I was like, wow, they actually got Krasinski for it. They really did it. Wow, that's kind of monumental. And then, oh yeah, they drop a bomb at the end of the movie. Oh yeah, Charlize Theron's in the MCU now too. Like I said, like crazy shit, honestly. Um, so yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Fantastic Four down the line. Um, one thing, honestly, after watching the movie, I was kind of surprised is we don't actually see Chiwetel Ejiofor's Mordo in the current like universe we know. We don't actually see the Mordo we know. We only see the other Earth, other universe Mordo. I thought that was kind of interesting, just because the end of Doctor Strange 1 is leaving you with Mordo's broke bad and he's a bad guy now. And,
Yeah,
we don't know anything about what that guy's up to,
yeah.
honestly.
He's kind of out there. We'll
Yeah.
we'll see him eventually, I'm sure. Um, yeah, I think overall I left this movie feeling satisfied. But just as someone that hasn't seen everything all the time, and you being
Close.
someone that
Everything,
has
everywhere, all at once.
all at once, oh man, I'm never gonna get that. What was your response in just seeing another movie that has gotten so much acclaim for their portrayal of the multiverse and how inventive that was?
Yeah, well, I mean, Everything Everywhere All at Once is a better film than No Way Home. It's a better film than Doctor Strange 2. Significantly better. So I would encourage anyone who likes these kind of stories that got super mainstreamed by Into the Spider-Verse, seek out Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that is an amazing original film. And by comparison, Doctor Strange 2 is not that multiversal. Like we said, we don't really spend time anywhere except two places, which is not the case in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So I'll be interested to see how multiverse heavy future MCU stuff is, because I do still believe that it kind of eliminates a lot of your stakes when you're doing things in a universe that you don't care about and it doesn't really matter. Like that's
Yeah,
why they could do the Illuminati cameo, because they can just wipe their hands clean of it and never reference any of those people again if they so choose. And it would
yeah,
make sense to the fans. So I think handling your stakes is a challenge when you're juggling universes like this. Everything Everywhere All at Once really nails it. Spider-Man No Way Home obviously did the fan service angle of it, does it well too. This movie, I think that it's perhaps one of the weaker elements of Doctor Strange 2, but it doesn't hamper the movie at the end of the day.
I did think it was a cool scene when they were flying through the different multiverses and
Yeah.
like the the bodies were changing into different things, like from
Right.
drawings to paint to different forms. I thought that was pretty fun.
This is not a good compliment, but it reminded me of the hyperspace jumping sequence in Rise of Skywalker, where they're on like 10
Mm.
planets in a row.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good call. Yeah, I think they're trying to set up the stakes. If too much happens within these universes, then they kind of crash into each other and they're all destroyed. But I think we actually have to see like what that might look like,
Mm.
before we can actually like care about those stakes at all. Like it hasn't happened yet. We haven't actually seen these universes collide. So we'll
Right.
see.
One last note, just want to shout out Benedict Wong as Wong.
Yeah.
Haven't talked about him yet. He's really awesome in this role. Benedict Wong has awesome comedic timing. We've seen that in other stuff like What We Do in the Shadows. Obviously, it's a small supporting role at the end of the day, but I think he's a really funny guy.
I actually we didn't talk about much at the Kamertai, but I mean, I thought that was like a okay scene. I mean,
The fight
it
with all
yeah, the
the
fight.
sorcerers, yeah,
Yeah, and I think it was cool to see all the sorcerers like fighting together. Although again, Wanda's just too powerful, man. And like the fact that she doesn't just like get this kid immediately is just like crazy. Like it doesn't make
right.
any sense when you look
Hey,
at
I
how
mean, she
powerful
is
she is.
fighting sorcerers. It's not like she's fighting a bunch of people, but yeah, throughout the movie, Wanda waxes everyone. They
Yeah.
didn't hold anything back. It was good.
Anyways, we're gonna wrap it up there for this week. Dave, what are we doing next week?
Well, next week we'll be reviewing The Weeknd's entire discography, all these albums.
Nostalgia ranks, baby.
And then after that, we have a lot of stuff to get to. New Kendrick Lamar album, At Last. Harry Styles, Better Call Saul, final season part one wraps up. Atlanta season three wraps up. Made for Love season two. A lot of good stuff. Other music.
A lot of stuff to get to. Check out our Nostalgia ranks next week. Give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, and also hit that subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We'll catch you next week.